Hey there, my name is ARTFX. Today I want to do a tutorial about sidechaining and drum and bass. I've been getting a lot of questions about this because drum and bass is a very fast tempo and people just seem to have issues with sidechaining and getting that set up correctly. So today I'm going to do a quick tutorial about how to set up sidechaining in drum and bass and how I do it. I'm going to showcase the track first. I'm working on this track. I've got a short part of the drop selected and that's what we're going to demonstrate this on. So I'm going to show that first and then we're going to dive into the tutorial. Let's get to it.
There is darkness.
Okay, so here we are. This is the track we're going to be working with. Now, I've turned off all the sidechaining right now, and the key thing that I want to showcase to you is that it's not all about sidechaining when you want to make your bass and your drums work well together. See, right now I'm not doing any sidechaining. I am already compressing this and limiting this on the master track with quite a bit actually. If I play this, you can see that I'm already quite squashing this, so it still sounds rather good. There isn't really that much of a problem in this particular track. I feel actually that the bass and the drums already work quite well together, even though I'm not using any sidechaining whatsoever. This is about getting your mix to sound right. So how I did this is mainly that the kick drum has a lot of the bass taken out. So I have the kick drum here. It's built up out of a couple of different layers. I've got this layer right here. This is like my main electronic kick that I've got right here. And I'm rolling off a little bit of the sub. And that is very, very important because if I don't do that, we might get into issues with my sub bass. So I also have this kick right here, which is more of an acoustic kick. And on this one, I'm really taking out all of the low end, because if I don't do that, it sounds like that. So combined with the other kick, and then when I take the low end of the acoustic kick out, it sounds cleaner in the low end. So that is the first thing that you want to do. You want to control how much low end is in your drums to begin with. Because if you're going to layer it with a sub bass, and your kick drum has a lot of sub already, that will give you issues. You only have so much space in the low end that you can fill up, and if, you know, like your drums and your bass are very sub heavy, you will get into problems. So you can fix that by making sure that your kick does not have that much sub. I mean, it has a little, but it's not a lot. So that's kind of like the first step, getting that mix to sound right. So by just doing that, I already quite cleaned it up quite a lot, and it already sounds quite good with the bass. So I'm actually just gonna play the kick, the snare, and let's play the sub bass. So the kick, snare, and sub bass are like the main elements that should work together, and that's where you mostly want to apply your sidechaining. So this is what that sounds like. So it sounds rather clean already, but I think we can clean this up a little bit more. So let's go to the sub bass track right here. I have two sub bass tracks. I have this one, which is like my main sub bass track, which is a nice, really nice sub bass patch from Contact. And then I have this one, which is for like the higher pitched Reese notes. It's a bit quieter in volume than the main sub. I actually had a different sub for the main bass first, which was this one. But I didn't really like the sound of it. It sounded better with this sub bass patch. So let's get started. I'm gonna take the compressor here. Now there's a couple of different things that you could do. Like you have the regular live compressor, which is this one. And if you go into the sidechain mode, that's what it would be. Then you've also got the Live 8 sidechain compressor, which is this one. So the main difference here is in these modes. If you have the original Ableton Live 8, then I would advise you to use this compressor. So you can go online actually and find the preset for this particular compressor, and you can download it online. It's people have uploaded there. So just search for the Live 8 sidechain compressor, and you will probably find it. And if not, just let me know, and I'll probably upload it somewhere. But it's like they've changed the algorithms in the compressor, and somehow the old compressor, the Live 8 version, doesn't really click that much when you sidechain, and the new version clicks a lot more. So I still prefer to use the older one, but you could do it with this one as well. I mean, the difference is very small, and in a full mix you're probably not even going to hear it, but the Live 8 sidechain compressor does sound cleaner. So there are ways how you can probably fix it, like playing with the look ahead here, playing with the attack time. You could probably fix it and minimize the amount of clicks, but I still like to go for the Live 8 sidechain compressor. So I have that preset right here. I'm going to bring that in here, so it's already set up the way I want. I have a ratio of 6/1. I find that's just a nice ratio for my sidechain. Attack is all the way down to 0.01 milliseconds, and then I've got my release up to about 22 milliseconds, but that is a value that will change depending on the track. So I need an input for my sidechain. How I do it is I create a sidechain trigger track. So that's this one right here. This track is actually just a hi-hat sample, and I loaded that into a sampler, and then I made a really short loop section. Well, it's not actually looping, it's just playing once, but I just made it very short, and I gave that a fade out, so that we get this kind of thing. So it's just a really short hi-hat, and that is what I'm using to trigger the sidechains with. So I have a couple of different ones. You can see I have this one, which is my main sidechain trigger track. And for this one, I've basically placed one of those hi-hats on every point where there is a kick or a snare. So these are my kicks right here, and this is my snare. So you can see that everywhere there's a kick or a snare, I have one of those hi-hats. Now, I also have this track. This track plays in a different rhythm. So that's, again, a sidechain track, but this one only has a sidechain trigger on the spots where there is a kick drum, and it does not have a sidechain trigger on the spot where there's a snare drum. So I can use these different ones to get a different amount of sidechain on several different layers, and it might sound a little complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward, because I also have this other one, and this one is again the same thing, but here I'm only using a sidechain trigger on the spot where there is a snare, and I'm skipping all the kicks. So I basically split them up into 3 different sidechain trigger tracks, and I can use these. So if I play the drums and the bass, like what I just did, so if I play the kick drum and the sub bass, I might want to make those two work together a little bit better. So what you want to do now is, I could go onto the bass group, and I've brought in my sidechain compressor here, and let's take the sidechain trigger track as my input, and when I now play this, you can see that we have a signal coming in. So I'm gonna solo the bass, and let's bring this down quite a lot so that we really hear the effect. So that's sidechaining, right? The release time is now this is gonna tell us how long the sidechain will be. So if I bring it down all the way, we get a really short sidechain, and that is really short because we're using a really short input. So that trigger that I set up inside of the sampler is really short. So if I bring the release time in this sidechain compressor down to 1 millisecond, the sidechain itself will actually be almost the same length as the sidechain trigger track. So we get a really short sidechain, and that is the trick. if you have a really fast tempo, you want to have a really short input into your sidechain so that you can make those sidechains really short. Because the thing is, if you feed a long kick drum into a sidechain compressor, the shortest sidechain that compressor will then be able to do is the length of that kick drum. It's the length of the input that you feed into the sidechain compressor. So if you make that as short as possible, you can get your sidechains to be very short. So that is the main trick into getting sidechain to work in drum and bass. So now I have the release time, and the release time actually tells us how long the sidechain is going to be. So if I bring this up, and I'm only going to play the bass, you can hear that we get a lot more sidechaining, but there's one problem. I'm adding this on the bass track itself, and because I'm sidechaining to both the kick and the snare, I am actually losing a lot from the bass line. So, especially when I bring that release time up, you can hear we lose so much of the bass, and that's not really what we want. So if I bring it down shorter, we make room for the kick, and now we have a pretty good sidechain going on right now, but I feel it's still doing too much. So I could bring the threshold back up, but... And in this instance, it kind of works. It gives a pumping effect, which can be nice, but in a lot of cases, this probably would not work, and you're basically losing too much of the bass. So there are other ways you could do this. For instance, on the bass group itself, I'm going to keep the sidechain very transparent. So I might make the release longer so that we get a longer sidechain here. And just make it very subtle on the bass group. Now, on the sub-bass track, so this is the sub-bass track, we could also add sidechaining here, right? So, this is where those other two sidechain trigger tracks would come in. The main problem we would have when you're making drum and bass is usually between the kick drum and your sub-bass. So, it doesn't really make sense to sidechain the sub-bass to the snare drum, because the snare drum is probably not going to have any sub-bass frequencies in it. So if I'm going to sidechain my entire bass group to my kick and snare at the same time, we're going to lose stuff that we don't even need to lose. So I feel it's a lot better thing to do is to actually tackle this in a different way. So for instance, right now, the sub-bass, I would like to sidechain that only to the kick drum. So that's why I made that sidechain kick trigger channel, which only has a trigger on a spot where there's a kick drum. So like here, we have a kick drum, so there's a sidechain trigger. Here there's a kick drum, so we've got that sidechain trigger, and so on. As you can see, they all line up. And that is the point. So now I can go to the sub-bass track, put a sidechain compressor on there, I can go to my input here, and I can select the sidechain kick track, which I made, and now I can go to the sub-bass and do something like this. So let's make it a bit longer. I can bring this down a lot, so we get our maximum amount of sidechain. You can hear what it's doing, right? So I can make that about maybe this. And then maybe back it up just a bit again so that we don't get the maximum amount, because that's a lot. So there you have our sidechain, and now that sidechain is only applied to the sub, so the mid-range will not be ducked away, and that is great, because the mid-range doesn't really have to be ducked away, because that's not where the problem is. So only the sub is really moving out of the way for the kick drum, and that should clean it up already and make the kick drum a lot more audible in the mix. Now, I also have this other sub-bass track, so I should copy this over to this other sub-bass track as well, and now it should be applied to both of them. Now, I'm still applying this here, and the one thing that I might want to do, the mid-range of the bass will probably be a lot more in the same frequency area as the snare drum. So maybe I want to apply some sidechaining to the mid-range layers, and this one is only going to be sidechain to the snare. So I'm going to take that sidechain snare track, and I can just make the mid-range duck away a little bit on each snare drum. So let's bring that down a lot, let's make it a bit longer. That's way too much. Let's bring it back. So now it ducks away on the snare. So you can see on the bass group I've done sidechaining to my main kick and snare both at the same time, but I'm doing it very transparently, so very subtle, not really doing a big amount of sidechaining here. And then on the actual individual tracks, I will tackle the sub-bass problem with the kick by sidechaining the sub to just the kick. I will also do it on the mid-range layer by sidechaining the mid-range to the snare drum, because those probably might be conflicting a little bit. And you can take this further. So, for instance, I could take this to, let's say, the synths as well. Maybe I want to apply some subtle stuff to the synths. Now, there's not any synths going on here, so I can't really demonstrate that, but same thing goes for the atmosphere. Maybe there's some atmosphere in this section, like that you want to do some sidechaining as well too. So maybe you want to do this and get your sidechain trigger track and apply some sidechaining to the atmosphere. So you can apply it in a lot of different ways, and it's all about... You can even use it as like a creative effect. So for instance, this atmosphere is nice, but let's say I want to duck that away on each kick drum and really create like a pumping effect. So for instance, you could use the sidechain as a creative effect, like what I'm doing right now. You could create a couple of different sidechain tracks and have different variations in rhythm and use those as inputs to the sidechain to create interesting pumping effects, like what you hear on this atmosphere right now. And it's all about doing interesting stuff like that, and this could work in a mix as well. I mean, just hear the difference. This is without. And this is with. So you can hear how that creates a really cool pumping effect, which is kind of like more of a creative effect than a mixing effect, to be honest. I'm not doing it because there's a problem. I'm doing it purely for creative purposes. So there you have it. That's how you can really tackle sidechain in a good way. I know, guys. A lot of you are probably going to say in the comments, but a couple of months ago you said don't sidechain. I know. People change, okay? My techniques have changed, and I learned a lot more about sidechain, and I actually found out this way about how to control how short the minimum sidechain time can be. And that is all about feeding the right signal into the sidechain compressor. So the most important thing is making that sidechain input very short. The shorter that is, the shorter your minimum amount of sidechain can be. So that's all there's to it. Like, most people would simply take their main kick drum or their main snare drum as the input for the sidechain, but that kick or snare is probably going to be quite long, and because you don't have much space within each or between each drum sound in drum and bass, because the tempo is so quick, it will not work, and it will take out too much of the bass or take out too much of the synths, and that's not what you want. So to fix that is you create your sidechain trigger track, and I've made 3 in this particular instance, but you can do it with just 1. You can just make that one single one for the main kick and snare and do it with that. I just like a little bit more control, so I made one specific for the kick as well and one specific for the snare. But that's all there's to it. So that was it, guys. That's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something. If you do, then please leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more drum and bass content, but also music production content in general. I'm trying to get my channel up to 100,000 subs. We're doing pretty good, but I need your guys' help. So if you can sub to this channel, that would be great. And if you want to click the bell notification icon so you get notified when I do a video or a live stream, that would be great as well. If you have any ideas or requests for a future tutorial, you want to see me how to make a certain genre or how to make a certain sound, or just want to ask me some questions in general, then comment below and let me know what you want me to do next, because I keep lists of everything people request, and when I want to do some tutorials, I just go to that list and pick some subjects from it. So if you have an idea, let me know. Other than that, I'm going to be doing another live stream tomorrow. We're probably going to be working on this track, maybe a different track, but I think we'll be working on this track. So if you have some time tomorrow, 8 PM Central European time, I will be doing another live stream about drum and bass. So if you have some time, tune in tomorrow. That was it for this video, and I'll see you back soon. Peace.